Good evening, everyone. Nice to have you all here tonight. So tonight we have Mr. Brian Hearn. He's going to talk to us on intelligent design. It's good to see you all here to be able to discuss that with you. So just to open, we'll bow your heads and we'll open with a quick word of prayer. Now, dear God, we thank you for the beautiful day today that we have to enjoy. We thank you that we can come here and to learn more from your Bible about the amazing creation that you've created. We thank you so much for this blessing of being able to know these things, be able to study these things. And we thank you for this. And we pray now that you help us to appreciate your creation as we discuss these things tonight. And we leave this gathering in your care and pray through Jesus Christ. Amen. We'll just ask Brian to come forward now and give us his address on intelligent design.
All right, now I've got to if we put them now, we want to be in it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And so that means that we will have 2 people for each level. But when we say all, we all talk like that. Do you want to be in it?
On YouTube.
Oh,
Do you want to do it after or?
you better do it after.
Sorry.
Yeah, after. All right, okay. That's right. That's right.
All right, well, that puts the pressure on, doesn't it? Well, it was interesting that you were reading some of those words there. I wasn't planning on dealing with all of those subjects tonight, but I think everybody wonders where we came from. Where did we come from? And there are different answers to that question depending on who you are. So, for example, people who believe in a God, we call them theists. Okay, a theist is somebody who believes in God, and an atheist is somebody who doesn't believe in God. In the world today, something like 90% of people are theists. They believe in God. And only about 10% or even less than that are atheists. But many of them are in the Western world. Many of them are scientists, for example. And they don't believe in a God, they think, for various reasons. And because they don't believe in God, they have to come up with some other explanation for where we came from. And you've probably heard of evolution, for example, the theory of evolution, that life originated from no life. And when these ideas started, people didn't know much about life. By that I mean they didn't know much about the cell. You understand what I mean by a cell? The little tiny bits that make up our body. They thought that the cell was very simple. They thought it was like a piece of jelly, and that's it. But over the last 50 years, we've found out a lot about this molecule here called DNA. Everybody has heard of DNA. DNA is a code for you. Every creature has its own DNA. Even bacteria have got their own DNA. So as we've learned more and more about the cell and about DNA, the harder and harder it is to believe that it just happened by itself. The greatest scientists in the past were all theists. For example, Sir Isaac Newton. Sir Isaac Newton discovered gravity, the spectrum, and a whole lot of other things. Probably the greatest scientist in all time, Sir Isaac Newton. He said that his thumb convinced him that he was made by God. He looked at his thumb and thought, wow, it can do marvelous things. Anyway, the relevance of DNA, if I jump ahead on my PowerPoint, probably have to jump ahead a bit further than what I was going to, but this man here, Anthony Flew, he died a few years ago. He was the greatest atheist in the world. Okay, he believed in atheism, and then he changed his mind. And the problem with reading some of these, there's some long words. Shall I read it to you, or shall I get somebody? I'll read it to you. So, Anthony Flew, he opposes atheism. He's very well known. And he said, the latest biological research, quote, has shown by the almost unbelievable complexity of the arrangements which are needed to produce life, that intelligence must have been involved. So Anthony Flew learned about DNA. And after he learned about DNA, he couldn't believe atheism anymore, because DNA is a computer digital coded system. It's an information processing system, DNA. It codes for all of the proteins in our body. And he said intelligence must have been involved. So if we talk about the origin of life, that is, where did life come from? No scientist can make life. Nobody has ever made life. And the more that we learn about the cell, the less possible it is to make life. It gets more and more and more complicated all the time, the more we learn about the cell. So Christians and other religious people, they believe that God made life, that somebody very smart, somebody very intelligent must have made life. It's a bit like a watch. Where did the watch come from? With all of its parts and all of the cogs and things inside the watch, where did this come from? Did it come from nowhere? Did it make itself? No. Even something like this indicates, I don't know where they're coming up, but there's a little metal camel. Even something like this, you will never find in the desert. Camels like this don't make themselves. It's made out of metal. It has a very unusual arrangement. It looks like, not sure if it looks like a camel, but it looks like an animal. My wife likes camels, so she's got all sorts of different camels at home. I picked that one out. That's because the arrangement is unusual. You don't find DNA out in the universe, anywhere. DNA only occurs inside cells here on the earth. Don't find it anywhere else. And where you do find it, you have to find a lot of it all at once. It's like the watch. You have to have all the parts there from the very start. Otherwise, you don't have a watch. You don't have anything. And this metal like this, you don't find that out in the desert. You don't find this arrangement of things. So this is called intelligent design. Okay? I believe in intelligent design. I believe that we see created objects all the time. We know that these things don't make themselves. And even if you had never seen someone make a watch, by looking at it, you know somebody made it. Somebody made this watch. When you look at the world, you look at the human person, it's complicated. I don't think it could make itself. I study biology, so I know a lot about the cell and about DNA, and it's very complicated. It's very complicated. So let's finish off. This is still Anthony Flew. He says, it has become very difficult even to begin to think about constructing a natural theory of evolution of that first organism. What he's saying is it's very hard to even imagine where the first life would come from. It's too hard. It's far too hard. He says, my whole life has been guided by the principle of Plato's Socrates. Follow the evidence wherever it leads. So, as a philosopher, Anthony Flew was hit in the face by the evidence from DNA and everything else, which says the cell was made by somebody. So let's just go back a little bit and have a look. Oh, there's a picture actually of there's a little picture of DNA and how it is arranged in the cell. And every gene is hundreds of years long. And they code for brown eyes, or blue eyes, brown hair, black hair. They're like computer code. And no computer game ever made itself. No computer program ever made itself. Word, PowerPoint, these are programs that came from an intelligent mind. They don't make themselves. Oops. Purple's a bit hard to read, isn't it? I guess this is a little bit like what it would look like inside a watch, with all the little cogs, all so that this will stay on time within a second or two. It's amazing piece of machinery. Uh, Simple but extremely complex at the same time. Just talking about random as opposed to design, you'll notice this square is made up of blue squares and purple squares. That looks fairly random. But what about this picture? That has a pattern. Now, it could be random, but it seems to have a very symmetrical pattern. I might predict that this had been made by somebody because of the unusual arrangement. Now, in the watch, it's even more unusual, more and more unusual than that. Well, these pictures here, we all know that sometimes, I think that's a rock on Mars. It looks a little bit like a face. Now, did somebody make the face, or is it just chance? It's probably just chance. But what about these faces here? These faces are from Mount Rushmore in America, and these are 4 presidents of the United States of America. And I think that's Abraham Lincoln. I don't know the rest. Anybody know the others? But they look like people. That looks like Abraham Lincoln. There's his little beard and so on. Was that designed? Or did it just happen by chance? Maybe the wind and rain. no, Wendy's going, no. It's not possible. This is a Indian arrowhead, you know, on the end of an arrow. This could have been made by chance, but notice the chip, 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 and it's very hard rock. It looks like somebody has deliberately chipped it into a shape. If it was just the wind and rain, it would probably be very smooth. Oh, there's our watch again. We've all looked for patterns in the clouds, and this is a famous English saying from Hamlet. I think it looks like a weasel. That's what that says. He thinks it looks like a weasel. I think it looks like a weasel. Imagine if you saw some writing in the clouds. You'd go, no, somebody must have done that. Maybe a plane has gone through and written in the sky with plane. So it's about improbability. It's not likely to happen by itself. That's not likely to happen by itself. That won't ever happen by itself. That probably won't happen by itself. That might happen by itself. But we are very used to identifying things that are made. Just about everything here has been made by people. You won't find it naturally out there. What about this? What about this? Is this a created object, or did it just happen by itself? Well, here's a model of the human eye, and it shows the circular muscle to let light in. It shows the retina on the back here for detecting the image, the nerve to take it to your brain, a sac full of liquid that's clear, the cornea that is clear, all of these things all at once, a bit able to focus on things. Now, you've heard of Charles Darwin. It doesn't say his name up there, but Charles Darwin wrote a book called The Origin of Species. And he thought that he believed in evolution, that life started itself in a pond and then it turned into everything else, and that the eye just came from somewhere. But in his book, Origin of Species, he says, to suppose the eye formed by natural selection seems, I freely confess, absurd. That means not likely, silly, in the highest degree. So Darwin said, to think that evolved sounds a bit stupid. But he said, yes, that's what I think. That's what I think. It seems silly, but that's what I think. Charles Darwin was a theist, but then he had some things happen in his own life. His favourite daughter died, and he said, there is no God. There is no God. And so he came up with a natural explanation for where everything came from. I don't think he was right, because of intelligent design. So whether we look at the human eye or anything else in the human body, or all the different animals and creatures you see on TV, the natural world is amazing. It is amazing. I think it's designed. I think that God made everything more or less the way it is. That's Anthony Flew. I've seen that thing. Okay. Sorry, I started at the end instead of the beginning. I don't actually want to read all of this, but perhaps as a little bit of a break, we might read a section of the Bible. I thought maybe Job 12. Job 12, I quite like Job 12. It's in the Old Testament, just before Psalms. Job 12. Job 12. And perhaps if we read from verse 7, we could read the whole chapter if we want to, or we can stop. But maybe if we start. Wendy, do you want to start at verse 7?
year has the one of the our talents and things to research is useful and understand the inside of the power or wisdom of the mind. Either the counsel and the understanding.
Maybe if we just stop just for a moment, just so you can reflect on those words. So verse 7, ask the beasts, they'll tell you. The birds in the air, they'll tell you. The bushes of the earth, he says, the fishes in the sea. What do they tell you? They tell you, verse 10, that, or verse 9, that the hand of the Lord has made them. And as somebody who studies biology, when I look at a fish or a bird or an organ inside the human body, the ear or the eye or the tongue, and I go, wow. And if one little thing goes wrong, you can't hear, can't see, can't taste. So what is the chance that these started by themselves? I don't think that they can. There must have been somebody more intelligent. Where did the universe come from? Where did the universe come from? Someone had to make it. Someone had to make the universe. Otherwise, it made itself. And if you've got teenagers, you know that never happens. That things don't just happen by themselves. Somebody has to do it. Somebody has to make something happen. You need energy to make things happen. Let's keep reading. And the judge is for the Muslim that the one of his once close the dog on the describes of it from who are and the fifth away the determinants of the elder. Therefore, he can't continue the thing unthinking, and the movement the field of the strong. The occurrence in the picture of the Okay, that will probably do. The first verses there were probably most relevant. That when you study plants, animals, people, and the universe, many people and many scientists in the past have believed that there must be an intelligent designer to make these things. Okay. Now, because you mentioned a couple of things here, I might just say a couple of things. Now, have you heard of Huxley? No, you haven't. Okay. Well, Huxley was an evolutionist. Huxley was around the time of Darwin, Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin was the one who popularized the idea of evolution. And Huxley believed, and he said that if you got monkeys typing on a typewriter, that they could type anything, even the whole Bible, without one mistake, or at least one chapter or one psalm. Now, this PowerPoint is a part of a much bigger one, and I don't have the slides. But when you look at the maths, monkeys typing on a typewriter will not even type one sum. It's too hard without a mistake. It's too hard. Chance just can't do what evolution needs it to do. Okay. So even if you had eternal monkeys typing on typewriters, you will never get any sense out of them if they're just doing it randomly. But if you got a child, even, a child could copy a page with intelligence. Okay. Chance is a very poor cousin to purposeful design. Okay, we'll just go through a couple of the slides. I don't think we'll read them, but so this one is just saying that atheism, or evolution, atheism, believes that everything in the world has got a natural explanation. Okay. And yet, forensics is a good example, I think. Do you understand what I mean by forensics? Forensic science? So forensic science is like on TV, CSI, where they're trying to find out who murdered someone. Do you understand what I'm talking about? So forensic. Oh, sorry, yeah. Oh, I've sort of left the script a little bit. Okay, I'll leave that one there.
Can you just say that forensics is what they use to work out how a person was murdered, you know, what killed, or what the process was of bringing a result. So sometimes they have maggots, fly maggots, and if the maggots are little, they know there's not much time. If the maggots have grown bigger, they know that there's more time. If they are actually flies, they know there's more time. It's not very nice, but that is the sort of thing that they study in forensics to find out who made a crime.
The point I wanted to make was that when they find somebody dead, they try and work out why they died. They might have just died from natural causes. Their heart might have stopped. But if they've got a hole in their head, they think maybe somebody shot them. Okay? You look at the evidence, and that's what a murder is. A murder is deciding that it is not natural. It is not natural. Sometimes murders look natural. Somebody might be run over with a car. But then when you look at other evidence, you think, that's they got a hole in their head already or something. And they say they were murdered. And so with atheists, they want a natural explanation for everything, but everything does not have a natural explanation. This does not have a natural explanation. This does not have a natural explanation. A murdered person does not have a natural explanation. The human body does not have a natural explanation. Even this shirt, this shirt here, do you notice a couple of things about it? It's got a button. The button lines up with a hole, and another button lines up with another hole. It looks like somebody designed it. It's got a hole for my arm, hole for my head, hole down here, and you don't find this in nature. You find the fibers, but you don't find this arrangement. This is a very unusual arrangement for nature. This shirt was designed by some intelligence. So that's what we mean here by creation. Creation. Genesis 1, we read last week. 6 days of creation. God made this, he did this, he did this, he did this, and then he finished. And that's what theists believe, that's what Christians believe, that's what people believe who believe in intelligent design. That God is a great intelligence, that he designed DNA, he designed cells, he designed the eye, the ear, the animals, the plants, everything. Everything is perfect. Why is it perfect? Because somebody made it. Why did the buttons line up with the holes? Because somebody designed it that way. But everything is too complicated to have just happened by itself. Genesis 1 tells us the story of how God made the world. I don't really want to talk about time or dating too much, really, because it's not as important. But obviously, if evolution were true, they need a lot of time. They haven't got enough time. But there are some arguments which we make about dating. You remember last week we looked at Genesis 1 and we talked about it being 6,000 years ago. Because when you add up all the family trees and everything, it seems to fit in there. Yeah, I don't really want to talk too much about dating because it's these slides here talk about fossils. Do you understand what a fossil is? Dead, something that's dead. Yep. Like a dinosaur or something like that. There's some interesting things about dinosaurs and other fossils is that the process involved in making a fossil, the animal has to be buried very quickly under a lot of sediment, a lot of mud and sand. They used to think that when an animal died, it would just slowly be covered up over a long period of time, but you don't get fossils like that. So if you go down the beach, there are no fossils forming down the beach. There's no fossils forming in your backyard. Okay, if a bird dies in your backyard, you won't get a fossil. Something will eat it. The ants will eat it, a crow will eat it, the bacteria will eat it. There won't be anything left. If a fish dies down at the beach, a crab will eat it, or a bird, a seagull will eat it. You don't get fossils. The only way you get fossils is when there's a catastrophe. And a little bit like a tsunami or something bigger. Now, the Bible talks about a great disaster. I don't know whether you've looked at it yet, but in Genesis chapter 6, I can't remember if this comes up. In Genesis chapter 6, there is the story of Noah and the great flood. Have you looked at that story? No, we haven't. Okay. Okay. So So,
That's okay, we will be covering that.
okay, anyway, I don't want to steal the thunder there, but Genesis 6 talks about this great flood, and many creationists and Christians and theists believe that many fossils were formed during that flood because it flooded the whole world. And when you look into the fossils, you'll often find hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of things all buried at the same time. Think about a dinosaur, bigger than a camel. Think about a big dinosaur. How would you bury that? Because when a dinosaur died, it would just get eaten. It wouldn't form a fossil. So to make a fossil dinosaur, you have to bury it under a lot of dirt very quickly. And if there's lots of dinosaurs, you need a lot of dirt. In fact, all the oil and the coal that we dig up around the earth are called fossil fuels because all the black oil was formed by dead fish buried under a lot of sediment. All the coal, or the black coal, is formed by burying forests under lots and lots of sediment all of a sudden. So what we're talking about here is a catastrophe, a huge catastrophe, maybe a worldwide catastrophe. And that's in Genesis chapter 6. Whereas evolutionists tend to want to tell us that fossils form very slowly. Everything has to be very slow for evolutionists, very slowly. But that's not the way you form fossils. Believe me. So we think that when you look at the fossils, creation and the flood is a better explanation for what you see. In a previous slide there, it talked about a catastrophe in America in 1980, I think it was. Mount St. Helens volcano blew up in 1980, Mount St. Helens it's called. And it produced sediment which would bury this hall in a couple of days. So you don't need to form layers very, very slowly. Sometimes things happen in a rush and everything gets buried all of a sudden. Okay? And we think that would explain why we get so many fossils, why we get so much fossil fuel like oil and coal and things like that as well. This is an interesting idea here. Maybe we could say a couple of things about that. This is talking about symbiotic relationships between different animals. I don't know whether people want. A symbiotic relationship is a close relationship between two different animals or two different plants where they both need each other to survive. There's so many different examples. I'm just trying to think of a good one. There are species of cleaner fish in the oceans. Cleaner fish wait for a big fish to come along, and then they crawl out around their gills, inside their mouth, and they pick off little parasites and things like that. Do you understand what I mean? This is a very close relationship. These little fish have got special colors on them, which says, I'm a cleaner, don't eat me. Don't eat me. And there are little cleaner shrimps as well, like little shrimpy things, and they do the same thing. They're all over the body. So in the ocean, there are cleaning stations. And when big fish get parasites and they get dirty and they swim up and they get in line, and these little cleaners come out and do their teeth, their ears, go all over their body and clean them up, and then they say, "I will see you next time." Now, this sounds pretty simple, but how did that start? Did a little fish think, "I'm going to go and clean"? Stop, big fish, I'm going to clean you. Yeah, just go in my mouth and I'll eat you. Or did the big fish decide, "I'm going to sit here until somebody comes and cleans me"? Nothing happens. It's not just a behavior. It's not just something that they've learned. It's in their DNA. It's in their DNA. They are programmed. They're programmed to do that. That's what they do. You put them in any tank, anywhere, that's what they do. So somebody had to write a program to tell them what to do. You understand what I mean? So these very close relationships don't develop slowly. They have to be there all at once. So just like the eye needs all of its parts all at once, these relationships in the animal kingdom also need everything there all at once. You know about flowers and bees that pollinate. The insects pollinate the flowers, from flower to flower to flower. Which came first, the flower or the bees? If you had a flower and no bees, you won't get any pollination. Okay, so you have to have everything there at once. It's what we call an all or nothing situation. When we look at cells, we call it irreducibly complex. Irreducibly complex. This watch is irreducibly complex. If we take out one bit, it won't work. You can't build it up slowly. If you just have one cog, it won't work. If you have two cogs, it won't work. You need everything there at once. Otherwise, it doesn't work. This is really just repeating some of what I've just told you already. This is probably what it comes down to in the end, is that cells are so complex, scientists can't make them. If you made a cell, you would be famous and you'd be rich. But the more we learn about cells, the harder and harder it gets. Back when Charles Darwin was alive, they just thought it was a bit of jelly. Easy, no worries. But the more we learn, the more difficult the situation becomes. Some people say, "Oh, we just don't know how to do it yet. One day we'll learn how to do it." No, we'll just find out it's more and more complicated. There's no magic here. It's like a computer. The more we find out about a computer, the harder it is to think that it could just be made by itself, of course. But when you look at the computer here, it's just a black thing. It just looks like a black box. It looks simple. It's not simple. It's very complicated. And we look at things and we think they're simple, and they're not simple. They're complicated. Maybe the last thing here, and then we can do the coral. Some people believe that mutations can change DNA into something better. So I don't know whether you've heard of the word mutation before. Mutation. Mutation is a change in a gene or a change in the DNA. So a mutation is, I'm just trying to think of something common. Red hair or even blonde hair is a mutation because those people can't produce black or brown in their hair anymore. They've damaged the gene. The gene does not work anymore. Blue eyes are a mutation. But blue-eyed genes don't actually produce blue. The eyes are just clear. They look blue because for the same reason as the sky looks blue. The sky is not blue. Air is not blue. Water is not blue, but it looks blue. Blue eyes are just not brown eyes. You can't produce brown. It's a mutation. Now, some people believe that mutations can change a monkey into a man, okay? A monkey into a man, or an animal into a human. But this is not true. It is not able to be demonstrated in any way at all. It is just wishful thinking. Mistakes do not improve the situation. Even though a blue-eyed gene produces something apparently new, it's actually lost something. You've lost it. You've not produced something new. So the idea of mutations producing evolution is never going to happen. It's never going to happen. Anyway, so just in summary, there's two theories about where the world came from. There's the atheist view that says everything just blew up and just made itself. You know, the Big Bang theory, that idea. The other one is Genesis 1, which says a super intelligent God made everything, made all of these complicated things. And the story about how he made everything is in the Bible, especially in Genesis chapter 1. The idea of intelligent design supports Bible's view that we were all created by a super intelligent God. I don't believe the evidence supports the atheists, and some atheists like Anthony Flew aren't atheists anymore because they learned about DNA. Hope that wasn't too complicated. All right, now Rosemary's going to. Yep. Yep. Thanks, Simon.
Fun. Well, thank you for that. We'll just close off the session